Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Kessner, and I am the executive director at the Take Back the Night Foundation. Take Back the Night has gone on for over 50 years all over the world. We are the oldest global movement to end sexual violence and support survivors. We have millions of people who've come to our events, our marches, our rallies, our vigils, and we encourage everyone who has not heard about us to find their nearest event. We just cataloged over 1,400, so we're growing every single year. Welcome to this session. We are talking about victim-centered rights, victims-centered support through our legal team. Take Back the Night runs this incredible network of talented, caring attorneys who've committed themselves to really putting all of their effort into being victim-centered with their practice. And you're about to meet a whole bunch of them. Amy, would you like to share a little bit about the hotline?
Sure. My name's Amy Tilton, and I am the assistant director at Take Back the Night Foundation. And as part of our work to support survivors, we have a free resource available to all survivors of sexual violence, sexual harassment, sexual abuse. And it's called the National Sexual Assault Legal Hotline. And the phone number is 567-SHATTER, or you can go to our website, takebackthenight.org, and find our legal hotline. And we have, like Katie said, this incredible legal team that is just ready 24/7 to support you with more information about your legal options that is specific to your case.
Lovely. So, what we're going to do in this session is have more of a discussion to talk with everybody on the meeting a little bit about what that looks like. What does a victim-centered approach look like? And as each of our attorneys kind of talks, they'll introduce themselves. But the big question is, what makes each of you victim-centered in your practice? And I'd like to toss that out just to get us started. Maybe Marla, would you like to start and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for having me, and Michael and Allie for being on here as well. One of the things that hit me when I started doing this is I found out that there are a lot of lawyers out there that really didn't understand what survivors needed and what victims needed. And frankly, we actually do start with language. Does somebody, where are they in their life? Do they feel like they're a victim? Do they feel like they're a survivor? What type of language do they want us to use? And also, being trauma informed and just knowing how to first interact and understand. Anytime somebody calls our office, I am always, it's so important to me to make sure that they know that they're believed and that they know that I understand as a survivor myself what type of courage it took to pick up the phone. And also, a lot of people that call our office blame themselves in different ways. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit more, but it's important to me to reinforce this is not your fault. It didn't matter what you were wearing, things like that. And so we just really start that out on call number one.
I love that. I love that you start with building a connection instead of an interrogation. That sounds really, I know you're laughing, but that's like that's where we got to
I
start.
know. I was
It's,
going to say,
you've
lawyers
got to
interrogate? What?
well, I had a rough go. If any of you remember when I went into the police station at age 18, the officer sat me down and he's like, some of the questions I get asked, and maybe this can fuel some of our conversation because this is why I am personally so passionate, also as a survivor. It's like, there I am, one of the first cases ever of college campus quote date rape. And the officer is like, I'm going to need to see that dress. I'm going to need to call your ex boyfriends from high school to make sure you're really a virgin. I'm going to need to see how expensive that dinner bill was because he paid a lot for you. So, that's when that was like my first impression of law enforcement and trying to seek justice. That was my first attempt. Well, second, I did tell the dean, but she said, you might ruin his life. You better go home and think carefully about what you're saying. So maybe I preference this whole meeting with a little bit of, I'm clearly all in. And it's because I've been there. I mean, everyone's been somewhere, but I was definitely there too. So thanks, Marlo. Yes, it did feel like an interrogation, or even I would say the dean was not even an interrogation. It was just like, you won't do this. You won't get anywhere because it's a closed door to her help. So that was hard. It was hard, but let's keep going. Michael, what do you think? And welcome,
Hi,
Michael.
Katie. Thanks for having me. My name is Michael Nimmo, and I'm an attorney based in Denver with a national practice representing survivors of sexual abuse. And one of the things that I've done at my firm to make sure that we have a survivor based approach to phone calls and representing our clients is I've built a team within my law firm that only handles survivor claims. They don't handle any other type of claims. They've been trauma informed through training. While we're not psychologists or psychiatrists, we have had training and learning how to answer questions and how to speak to survivors. As you can imagine, a lot of our cases can be people who were abused as children and they're now calling for the first time as an adult, and we're strangers to them. And so for them to share these details of what happened in one of the most traumatizing things of their entire life, if not the most traumatizing thing in their life, to a complete stranger is extremely difficult. Another thing that we do as a survivor based law firm is I have on call essentially an entire team of trauma based sex abuse psychiatrists at the university hospital that I offer to any survivor who calls. I can connect them with them immediately, within a matter of days, and they can get on the phone and talk to them. And those trauma psychiatrists, they're board certified, they're medical doctors, they went to medical school. They can help them, and then they can also help break the ice to sharing their story to someone who's medically trained better than I am to answer their questions and talk back to them before they start getting into legal stuff.
That's amazing, Michael. I'm so glad. I didn't know that you had that as part of your practice. It's fantastic. And last but not least is Allie. Welcome,
Hi,
Allie.
Katie. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for having me on today. And Katie, thank you for sharing your story about your experience. I'd like to think that we've come a lot further in 2024, but sadly, I think we all know that sometimes that's not the case. Um, to
Hmm.
that end, my name's Allie Stolpen. I work at Laffey Busey Law. And similar to Michael and Marlo, we also take a trauma informed, victim centered, and survivor centered approach. I think to Marlo's point, one of the first things that we like to do is understand language, not just victim versus survivor, but also pronoun language. And we want to understand like how you want to be addressed, how that is important to you. Sadly, a lot of our transgender community is targeted unfairly for sexual assault and sexual violence. So things like pronouns and addressing them as such is very important. One of the first things we do when we elect to move forward with representing a client is we actually send them almost like a client rights or a client bill of rights, sort of, so they have an understanding of what to expect, um, what to expect in the legal process, but also what to expect in their lawyering from in our representation.
Hmm.
I think that when you have been so abused by an institution, by an individual, the very first thing we want to do is build trust. And we want to make sure that people feel empowered to call the shots. Another thing that I think is
Hmm.
really important is we only want to hear the survivor tell their story one time. So we make sure to keep a recording or a some sort of ability to recall the conversation, whether it be in writing or recording or something of that nature, because we're not in the business of re traumatizing survivors. It took so much to pick up the phone and make the phone call to begin with that you're going to have to tell your story if you go through the criminal process to a judge, to a jury. If you're in the civil process, you're going to have to tell your civil lawyer, you're going to have to do it in a deposition. We're trying to minimize the amount of times that you have to relive this by only telling us one time. Obviously, we may have to follow up with details, but having that done one time is really important to us to the extent we're able.
Allie, as you were describing that, I was thinking about a lot of victims, tell the story one time. But in my podcast, a lot of the survivors, they, as we're talking live, like we're recording the podcast, the survivor will be like, "Oh, I'll say something," and the person will be like, "Oh, I forgot that also that happened," or I'll talk about, a lot of things we remember through smells or what we were hearing. And I'm really focused on like helping broaden that. I kind of think of it this way, actually, all like when I'm talking with someone, they might have had like this part, and it might be a big version of their story. Like, let's say it was here. And I like thinking about when we talk about this one thing, I'll say like, let's paint it into like a puzzle and a picture, and we'll go a little deeper into somewhere, and all of a sudden more memories come back. It's almost like the synapses got clipped, and then they got reignited just with thinking about it in a different way. I think that might be really interesting to talk about, because not every lawyer is thinking about asking a trauma victim to get triggered, but to get more information. What does that sound
If
like
I
to
can
the three of you?
jump in,
Yeah, go ahead, Marlo.
so this could be like a podcast in of itself with the neurobiology. And Katie, what
Mhm.
you're really talking about is how the brain reacts to trauma. And initially, it may be that we do only have this, and it's going to
Mhm.
be through our senses. So it's going to be feelings and emotions, and I can't really remember what happened, but I can remember the poster that was on the wall. When I was young, maybe it was a Teen Beat poster, then there's some association with that, and it's just so it's we don't expect victims to tell a linear story, because a lot of the times there's just going to be bits and pieces, and allowing them to put that puzzle together in a manner in which they want. And it may be that we think we have all the puzzle pieces, and then when we throw them all out on the table, and you don't actually have that picture. And so it's really understanding the neurobiology, the process of trauma, and being able to fit that in a picture in a way that your client wants, not in a way that I want, not in the way that somebody else wants, but in a way that your client wants.
Okay, then here's another question to toss out. Let's imagine that this victim comes to you for a civil, but they already did a criminal, and maybe they lost. And maybe it's because at that point, when they had the criminal trial, their story, they couldn't remember some of the key things that might have helped them. Is that possible? And then does it make it harder on you all because someone's going to go back and like quote their testimony and say like, you're making up new good stuff just to win this time? I'm just hearing what the naysayers might say. What do you all think? I mean, is that possible, or how do
It
we
is
handle
possible,
it?
and I think Mike can jump in here, especially talking
Yeah.
about the team that he has and how that team would be able to come in and describe how trauma affects the brain.
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, there is a lot of times when the criminal case, maybe it hasn't been lost, maybe it has, but it didn't go forward and it didn't go the way that the survivor wanted. And so they're only left with the civil claim. And I think it's important for survivors that are listening to this to know it's okay that you don't remember everything the first time you call a lawyer. Like, that's okay. We don't expect to have all the answers right off the bat. And as lawyers who do this, we know through experience and training that it takes time to get the information, and we're going to be patient with you to get that information. And in particular, addressing the question that you just had, Katie, with maybe they didn't share everything during a criminal process. So a lot of things that happen in the criminal process may not necessarily be public information that could be used against them. But even if it was, what I would do as a survivor lawyer is work with one of the psychiatrists that are trained for sexual abuse trauma specifically, and that's their specialty, because there are medical diagnoses about how the trauma impacts your memory and how it impacts your brain that they can delve into and comment on as an expert, which could potentially address any concerns with coming up with additional information that they didn't have initially.
To Mike's
Mhm.
point, and I think and to Marlo's point, which I think are very good ones. I think part of this, as being a lawyer, is you kind of almost have to act as the bridge and help the survivor find the resources in order to help them tell their story to the best of their ability and more fully. So when someone comes in, to Michael's point and to Marlo's point, and to your point, you might not have all the details, right? But I want to hear you tell your story one
Mhm.
time, let it sit. Then I want to be able to put
Mhm.
you in touch with people who are psychiatrists, who are therapists, who are able to help you
Mm.
process your trauma and help you process your experience in order to understand how it's more deeply impacting you. Because at the end of the day, humans love data and they love being able to make sense of things with numbers and graphs and things of that nature. Whenever we move forward with a damages expert in a sexual abuse case, they have trauma informed measures that will actually measure malingering to see if the person is exaggerating or is telling the truth or things of that nature. Exactly,
Wow!
because we want to understand that we want the defense and the jury and the judge to understand that these reactions and that this experience is not being exaggerated or made up or inflated. I mean, we have the statistical data to show it.
Nice. Wow. I'm sure Amy would talk about this, but I love when Amy usually is like, "This sounds crazy expensive. How are we gonna pay for all these people?" But maybe I don't know, Amy, if you want to talk about that or like our hotline, and it's like the folks here are giving their services, and it's the whatever you want to share again.
Yeah,
It was so good.
I had a question. I mean, we can talk again about the legal hotline, and I'll share definitely that call in information at the end. But I had a question for our team about support people. A lot of this sounds like, as new memories are coming up, as a survivor is talking about their experience, that can be hard, and sometimes people want a support person. Is that possible to have a support person with you as you go through this process? Someone that, a loved one in your life that um, is is supportive to you, and if so, what portions of the process can they be there for? Can they, be in the meetings with you all? Can they be in the meeting in depositions, that sort of thing? When can they and can they not?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one. So the answer to the question is yes, the support person can be involved in the process. And in my opinion, they can be involved as much as my client wants them to be involved. Um, there is there are times when we have something called attorney-client privilege. I'm sure most people have heard of that term. And what that means is when you are speaking to your client, nobody else gets to ever know what you talk to your client about, and vice versa. The client speaking to me, nobody gets to know what the client says to me. It's protected by attorney-client privilege, and there is no rule that gets around that. Period. End of story. When they have a support person involved, like let's say we're having a client meeting with my client, the support person can absolutely be involved. However, they need to understand that anything that's said in that room is no longer protected by the attorney-client privilege because the support person is not my client. And that does break the privilege, which means, in theory, someone could ask my client in a deposition, did you ever meet with Mr. Nimmo without with another person in the room? And the answer would be yes. What did you talk about? And they would get to learn about that conversation. So that's something to keep
Oh,
in
That's
mind. But that's easy to get around too, because what I do when I talk to my client, I say, look, we're not going to talk about anything that's super important about your case, but I want you to have the support person with you, and you can talk to me about whatever you want. Just keep in mind, we're not going to get into details. We're not going to talk about money. We're not going to talk about how strong your case is or how weak it is or whatever the factors are coming to the case.
I also want to jump in on Michael's point. If a survivor would like to have someone accompany them, and a lot of times in my practice, we see this with parents who've had children that have been abused. Obviously, if there's a minor involved, you're going to want a parent present if the child needs them there for emotional support. To that end, I'd like to caution people about the nature of secondary trauma, which is when a person actually starts to take on the trauma of another individual because of the fact that they're so involved in the process. And you also can see that in spouses when they can see their spouse who have been involved in an a sexual assault or something of that nature, and then they see the trauma and then they take on trauma themselves. I mean, I don't want to speak for Mike or Marlo, but in most of our practice, whenever we have a case where a spouse was sexually assaulted, inevitably their partner is going to get deposed as well, because the fact that they have suffered and carried the burden of this trauma alongside of their partner.
Yeah, that's important to keep in mind. Um, let's talk a little bit about another aspect of the process that some victims might be fearful of is those around them blaming them or working against their work with you. Like um, my parents didn't support me. They said, don't do anything that I did. So I had to figure out how to navigate that without parental support. Um, what do you do in those situations where you have a survivor who really wants to move forward, but whether it be immediate family or friends or boss or peers or are working against them? How does your practice help them through that part of the possible experience they're going to have?
I have a couple of examples with that. And, as we keep saying, it depends. But we want to make
Right.
sure, again, that everything is victim centered. And the most important thing that I do is we need to be honest. I've had cases where we knew that ultimately the parents were going to find out about the phone call. And it was a church abuse
Right.
case. And so we let the client decide because he knew he did not want his parents to find out. They were very, very involved in the church and they discouraged him from coming forward. And so, again, reinforcing that we believe them, finding the right people for them to talk to. For instance, making sure that if there is a religious affiliation, we have someone here that can speak to them, that have those same experiences, but also connecting them with the resources that they need. But I never want to discourage anybody, but I also want to be honest in that, hey, we can keep certain things from your parents up until a point. We might be able to settle your case, which is not a process that goes to court, without getting your parents involved if we have enough information. But if your case goes to court, your parents are likely going to be involved.
Marla, oh, go ahead. I was, yeah, you
Your
finish.
experience is unfortunately not uncommon. I know somebody else whose parents, rather than focusing on the perpetrator, asked asked the victim, have you asked Jesus for forgiveness for what you did? And
Right.
so
No.
yeah, and again,
Yeah.
and so
Hard.
we give that support and we act as that bridge, as Ali said. But again, we make sure that we know that what the client's focus is and support them as much as possible, and making sure that they are protected as much as possible.
And where I want to head next, though, is just first another compliment to our legal team. I mean, for our listeners, our viewers, you're looking at three incredibly talented and committed folks, and you're hearing a sample of what it's like to work with the Take Back the Night legal team. And I'm just reminded constantly as you all are talking, it's so breathe a fresh air breath, kind of a thank goodness things have changed so much, because I'm just remembering nobody ever asked me anything about how I was feeling. It was also tactical and finish line, and I could have been talking about a stolen wallet, not like a stolen self, a piece of myself. So I think it's marvelous that you all are thinking like that. And it sounds like survivors, when they reach out to you, are going to, you're at least going to try and listen and help point them into directions where they can be heard and be supported. So thank you. Amy, what should we cover next in victims' rights?
How about breaks? I think this can all be really overwhelming. And if survivors need to take breaks, um, is that allowed both through the meetings with you all and through depositions and trial, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So, and meetings with us, any breaks can happen at any time. I also have different rooms that I meet with people. I have a room that I call the comfy room, and that is I when people come in that are survivors, I say I have a couple different places to meet. Do you want to meet in this room, or would you like to meet in this room? Making sure that they're comfortable. Do you want to have a virtual meeting? Do you want the first meeting to be on the phone? What is it that you would like, and make sure that we can accommodate them? Of course, when it's our meetings, anything can happen. And take as many breaks as you want. Let's have as many meetings as you want, and let's have as few meetings as you want. You don't want to talk to me because that re-traumatizes you. Only call, you only want me to call you when I have something significant to say. I will do that. And so we really just try to get feedback from our clients to make sure that that process is honored. As far as depositions go, and Mike, do you want to jump in on depositions?
Sure. So in a deposition, when your client is being deposed, meaning they're the ones getting questioned from the defense attorney, um, the defense attorney controls what questions are being asked, and we don't have much say in what he or she asks in that deposition. However, you can control when you take a break. And as the attorney, my rule of thumb is at the end of an hour, if it goes an hour, we're taking a break whether you ask for one or not. I'm going to make you take a break, and we're going to go outside and we're going to talk for 10 or 15 minutes and get a drink of water, whatever you want to do, get a breath of fresh air, whatever it is you want. But with that being said, if my client wants to take a break during the deposition, like within the hour, they just tell the attorney, I would like to take a break. There's really only one rule that applies to that, and that is if there's a question in front of them that hasn't been answered yet, the attorney's going to say, no problem, but you need to answer my question first. And the reason why is they don't want the client going out and asking me, how do I answer that question? And then me telling them how to do it, and they go back in and answer it later. So that's really the only rule is like if there's a question pending, you answer it. But other than that, you want to take in a 2 hour deposition 5 or 6 breaks, done. We'll take 5 or 6 breaks.
That's really
Mhm.
helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I know we could talk for a long time. I'm just trying to think of some more questions that I get asked a lot when people are considering even talking to you all. And for those of you watching, listening, Take Back the Night has a lot of ways to share your story and to join kind of all of the things we're doing. So we have a forum if you just want to get your story down somewhere and have it read. That's one of the things we offer. If you're ready to actually talk to someone like any of the great folks on this meeting, you can absolutely do that and take it to another kind of legal level. But in our events, just in case anyone didn't know, when you go to an event, it could be in a community or at a college or any, 40 countries in the world, those events have vigils and places where you can start to like at least hear other people share their stories. So it's a confidence building way to start someplace. So, the process of victims and victims' rights to me is it's a journey. It's not like a stamp, like on a passport. You're in, you're in the country. You're on the other side. You're not just healed fast. And I think it's really wonderful that all the attorneys have so many things. I'm thinking small things. What about like and any examples? Maybe we kind of round it out with some examples of things that the three of you have done to be victim centered specifically. I can think about when I'm talking with survivors myself, or when I was doing the rape crisis center work that I did, volunteer work. We would have tissues, obviously, but even like scrunchy things to hold and good aromatherapy handy just all the time, a pillow to hold on to, like a blanket. Some people get chilled. Some people start to sweat, so you might need ice pack and the blanket. Just simple comfort things that I don't know that is the normal course of action for a lot of law practices. Does this resonate with any of you that these are the kinds of things you've considered? Allie, do you want to start?
So it sounds silly, but one of the very first things I do when I am now in charge of there we go
Oh,
of representing a case is I give my personal cell phone number to survivors. So
Wow.
I don't want you to be in a position where if you are having a moment, and I mean, I have clients that have suicidal ideation and things of that nature. I'm not a therapist
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
not able to help you process this, but I can be the voice of reason and tell you to call 911. And
Mhm.
things pop up and things come up at different times. And I don't want you to feel as though you have to have a barrier of getting to me if something is coming up. Obviously, I don't, my clients are very respectful of this. They don't abuse this, but having the knowledge or just the comfort of access to your attorney, even if it's after hours or early in the morning, I think makes a huge difference for people. Marlo, I'm
Nice.
going to pivot to you since you have your
Yeah, and so he's here.
co-counsel.
He's pretty much always here. And when people come and visit, they have the option of whether they want him with us. I don't think I've ever had anybody say no. And people, feel a little bit more comfortable if he can be next to them. I mean, this is about as excited as he gets about anything. Um, we also, and I was looking around to see if I had one. We have kind of what's called a smudge kit that we give our survivors, which does include just a little bit more special things. As silly as it sounds, it's a rock and a mineral that provides gets cleansing and negative energy, and people can just hold that. Those types of things. And again, meeting with them in a different room. And then we have a dedicated client communication application where clients can go on anytime they want. And put a message in if they're thinking about it, how they're feeling, and they can go there and put that in 24 hours a day. Obviously,
Wow.
we don't have somebody on at 3 o'clock in the morning, but what you will know is that if you're typing at 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody is going to read it and respond to it when they get to work the next day.
Nice. Thanks, Marlo. Michael, do you want to add anything else?
Sure. Our focus at our firm, and you're just wanting examples, is um, we want our client to feel like they are in control, and that's our number one goal. Because when most of, if not all of our survivor clients feel like they've lost that control of the with what happened to them, and we want them to know you get the control back. I don't control anything. So it starts with simple things like when I introduce myself to them, I ask them what would you like to know about me. Like I just want them to know you get to control this conversation. I'm not controlling the conversation. I ask them where would you like to meet if you would like to meet. Similar to what Marla was saying. I asked them, would you like music in the room when we meet? Like, I just constantly try to reinforce you have the control of this situation. No matter what we're talking about, no matter what we're doing, you control. I'm here to give you advice, and that's it. And so that's kind of how we approach
Nice.
it. I haven't, I actually like the idea of using a dog. That's Marley should have told me about that before. But and like Allie, I do give out my cell phone, so that is something I do, and I encourage people to text me because a lot of times I'll get phone calls and I don't know the number, and I don't want to have to answer telemarketing calls. But I tell them anytime you want, you text me, and if I don't get back to you within the next hour, you will get within 24 hours you will get a response to me, and it doesn't matter what time of day, doesn't matter if I'm on vacation, you can text me and I will respond within 24 hours. So I try to do that, and that's just again reinforcing you have the control. You don't have to abide by some law firm rules. You get to just contact me directly if that's what you want.
To that end, about the
Wow.
control, we even go as far as saying, do you want to meet with a male or a female attorney?
Yeah, good point. I do that too.
And there's nothing, I'm not saying that one lawyer is better than another. This is obviously not a gender thing, but based upon the experiences that a survivor has had, all of the teams that we have at Laffey BC Law are mixed gendered. And for an initial meeting, like Marlo was talking about, if this is the very first time you're talking about your story and you were abused by a woman or you were abused by a man, that might not necessarily be the best idea for you to meet someone of the same gender when you're going through the initial intake. Obviously, you will build trust and get to know the team and things of that nature. But I think that Michael and Marlo bring up very good points about there has to be efficacy in the survivor's decision making at every step of the way.
Mm. Thanks so much, Allie. Anyone want to add anything else to that topic?
I think the most important thing is follow through. And so if we tell you, hey, we're going to call you tomorrow at this time, we make sure that we call you tomorrow at this time. And if something comes up or something happens and we weren't able to get that medical record, or weren't able to look at that document, we still make sure I'm going to call you tomorrow and I'm going to say and take ownership of that. I'm sorry, I did not look at that document. Let's set another time. Or just making sure that we do what we say that we're going to do. Because I think that in the legal profession, that's really hard sometimes, to make sure that, a lot of lawyers are like, oh yeah, I'll get to that, I'll get to that, I'll get to that. And especially in these types of cases, it's really important to make sure that we're all following through like we say we are.
Thanks so much, Marlo. I think the conversation has been extremely encouraging, and our listeners who ever wondered if there could be a dream team of lawyers, I think you're looking at a dream team of people on our team at Take Back the Night. So we're extremely grateful for your time and your thoughtfulness as we talk about this difficult journey. Amy, it would be great if you could remind everybody about how the hotline works.
Definitely. So I know a lot of you are probably listening and going, oh my word, this does seem like the dream team. How can I find a trauma-informed lawyer like one of these? Or, if you're not in their geographic area, how can you find a lawyer who's like them and who is trauma-informed and cares about survivors? And that is why we've set up the Take Back the Night National Sexual Assault Legal Hotline. And it's to give you information about your legal options, and if it's appropriate for your case to pursue legal civil action. We have a whole network of legal team members who are trauma informed and really care about victims and their needs, like the three members that we have here today. So sorry, and you can call 567-SHATTER, the phone number, or you can go to our website, takebackthenight.org, and you can find information about our legal hotline there.
Thanks so much, Amy. And just as a final reminder, if this has inspired you to get involved and be a part of our team, a volunteer, participate in our events, become a fan, become a member. We welcome everybody who cares about, obviously, the rights of victims and survivorship, but also ending sexual violence for once and for all. If we can dream that big, that someday the all of us on this forum will be doing something very different with our time. So that's the dream, but we'll keep working our way inch by inch and person by person, and case lawsuit by lawsuit. Sometimes lawsuits, I said once, sometimes therapists, you don't see them splat. Like, therapy changes corporate policies, but you do hear lawsuit changes corporate policies. So I encourage anyone who really also thinks that big and wide, your case might be the one to change the world. You just never know. So thank you all for participating and for watching. And I hope you'll also join more of our podcast sessions with the Dear Katie podcast. So thank you and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.